Happy Sunday, friends. I'm back with a video about Art Lucier. If you have not already seen it, there is a video that Laura-Lynn did yesterday, which was Saturday. Today's Sunday, the 27th of April. So she would have done it, well, it was published at least on Saturday, April 26th. And I did a video yesterday and I actually talked about Art Lucier a bit. I had no idea that there was a public apology. I am not on all social media accounts. I have Facebook and obviously I have my YouTube channel. I know that a lot of information is on X, but I'm not on there. I know people send me stuff and I appreciate that because I don't always have time to go to the different social media accounts to look at things. So anyhow, now that we are here and I'm going to talk about the alleged apology, I'm going to have to say it like that, the alleged apology of Art Lucier to Joe Pulaski. And I have to apologize to Joe because I referred to him yesterday in my video as John. That is not the accurate name. His name is Joe. So before I start, I want to give a trigger warning because if any of you are dealing with a narcissist or anyone that is demonstrating narcissistic qualities or attributes, this could be triggering. So I just want to share that because I'm going to be kind of breaking it down in regard to Art's statements in the video and commenting also on things that Joe said as well. I do commend Joe because I think that he is in a very good place. You can just tell based upon what he was sharing with Laura-Lynn that he is able to identify things that Art displays. So we'll get into it. But again, I just want to say to anyone that might be dealing with this, just if that could be a trigger for you, just don't watch this video. It might not be the season for you. Watch it sometime later or never. It's up to you. All right, so what I'm going to do is link Laura-Lynn's video that I'm referring to in the description box. And when she brings Joe on to discuss Art's alleged apology video, it starts around 40 minutes in. So just to let you know, it's an excellent video. Watch the whole thing. But if you're going just to see that part, it's around 40 minutes in. And so Joe starts out by telling Laura-Lynn that when he heard about the apology online, he was kind of excited and he went straight online to view it. And he shared that this could be, and he described himself kind of emotionally saying that he has a level of love for Art. And when he heard that Art had a public apology to him, Joe, personally, he was interested. And then he shares that he felt like a chump. Those are his words. He used it twice throughout his video afterwards. And I don't know if Joe ever will see this video, but if you do, I can promise you that you are not a chump, that what you shared was heartfelt and it's what a normal, healthy human being would feel like and would do. And to my audience, you know, I've shared recently on Elizabeth Davis's channel with Lynn Demarest from Gospel of Narc and with John T. Now, Lynn Demarest, I'm just sidebarring here for a minute, is very versed in narcissism. So please, if you have not already gone to her channel, please do so. She has extraordinary videos and I would love to hear her take on this alleged apology as well. But I shared my own experience because my mother was a narcissist and I've dealt with people that are, you know, either you can deem them that or they have the tendencies or the qualities. And, you know, technically, because I went to the DSM-5 online today to just confirm whether narcissism is in there. And it is a condition that's in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, which is what the psychologists and psychiatrists use. It's their Bible. That's what they use to officially diagnose a condition. So it's in there, and I think it's called, let me look and see if I made a note about it. I know it's cluster B, I think, yes, which cluster B is a personality disorder. So to be fair, I don't know sitting here today whether Art has been diagnosed with that condition. So I will try to, what I would like to do is refer to qualities, the narcissistic qualities or tendencies. I would venture to say that most of you that are watching me, you have experienced some degree of this. And if you watched the video that we did yesterday on Elizabeth's channel, Lynn did a really good explanation. She described it as the spectrum of autism, that there's varying degrees, or I think that's what she said, varying degrees. I would agree with that because not all narcissists are the same. I mean, and I think if we are to fairly identify it or refer to it as people that have narcissistic traits, because the one thing that I always notice is the lack of empathy. They just don't care about anybody. They're selfish. They like to, put themselves up on a pedestal, make themselves look really good, all the while making others around them look bad. So that's the framework I have. I know it's a very, very dumbed down one, but that's what I work with when I'm talking about people like this. And so it really hurt my heart to hear Paul refer to him as a chump, because I can tell you this would happen to me over and over again with my mother before I cut the cord, which was about, I would say 12, 13 years ago. And so even as an adult, I would get so excited if there was any hint that I thought that she was interested in mending the relationship, anything. It was almost like a little baby, or a dog, just salivating. I was very hopeful. And that is, I think, normal. I mean, yes, I probably should not have allowed it to go along as long as it did. But it ended up good because I'm healthy and I'm happy and I don't have any bitterness and I don't hold any grudges or anything. So for Joe, when he said that, it just kind of triggered that about, oh, all of that came flooding in for me. And I'm sure it could be for you too, because you remember what those people would do. And because you want the relationship, especially if it's a family member. And here we see Art refer to Joe as his son. And I believe that Joe probably looked up to him as a dad. And so it's just heartbreaking because that's what we're dealing with. And, when you think of an actual apology, and Joe was referring to it, he was clear to Joe in his own mind, in Joe's mind, that this really wasn't, after he was listening about the first minute or so, and that Art was saving face. And Joe was pretty upset, and he could only listen to a few minutes at a time before he would rant. And that is normal because he had the expectation and then he was let down. And that's what people with these characteristics do to their victims. They will bring them up and you think, oh, there might be something that we can do here to fix this relationship. Or maybe you think, oh, they're finally getting it. They're finally seeing the light. But we're dealing with a different animal here. I know we're all human beings, but we've got to establish the baseline, right? There are healthy adults and there are non-healthy adults. And then there are adults that have actually been diagnosed with these mental conditions. That's what we're dealing with. It is a spectrum. And I would venture to say, based upon what I've seen, heard, listened to, watched, Art Lucier is not a mentally healthy person. He's not. And a mentally healthy person is what is needed in the pulpit. An unhealthy person mentally should never be anywhere near it. So I'm just making that statement very clear at the forefront, just so that we can build on that. If Art was actually concerned with Joe when he set out to make this video, this alleged apology video, a normal, healthy person would likely go through what this could look like. I don't think he did that. But again, I don't think he's healthy. I don't think for 1 second he thought, wow, this could actually re-victimize him. This could actually re-victimize other victims that are hearing it, or even people that have been hurt by people with narcissistic traits. I don't think he went that far. I don't think he has a pastoral heart, so he's incapable of going there. Because what this did, in my opinion, is it not only re-victimized Joe, but it re-victimized victims in general. So there you go. That's how I see it. We all filter information that we get. You know, you watch, sitting here right now, you're watching the video. We all filter the information that we receive through our own backstory, our own experiences, our childhood, social settings, social status, education, our jobs, our careers, just all of that. So all of us, we're all going to filter all of this information that we get uniquely. A lot of people that are on here that are interested in my videos, they have been harmed in some ways, and they're in various stages of healing. So for me, with my background, I have to look at what I'm seeing in this video with Art, and then how I'm seeing Joe process it. I'm also processing it through my own lens, which you will do as well. And so I say that to say that I'm sure that you are going to pick up on things that I'm not even touching on here. So I'm just focusing on the major things that I picked up on. I like to watch a video twice if I'm going to be commenting on it, so I can process it. My dog, you know, he has all of these toys, and then he'll just start chewing on stuff that he shouldn't be chewing on. But I'm gonna let him, because I don't want to freak him out right now. This room is actually the storage that it's not a storage room, but right now it's just stuff is being dropped in here, and I can't get mad at my dog. All right, so with Art, with his baseline, in my opinion, he is not someone who is empathetic whatsoever. He is reckless, and he even admits it throughout his video. He's careless, and he doesn't care about people, which is an attribute you should absolutely not have if you're a pastor. He's even violent. And all of this is based upon what I've seen, heard, read, watched. So when Joe starts off here and he talks about feeling like a chump, my heart really went out to him. And again, just my own experience. And in my experience, when I did allow my mother in, when I shouldn't have, it always ended in destruction. And I am not being dramatic whatsoever here at all. 100%. It always ended in destruction. She was a master at destroying relationships. If she had her way, I would not be married right now. And that's another story. I don't need to go into it, but it was actually just disgusting, the things that she would do. That's just how she was. Now, I don't think that Art is anywhere near to what my mother was like. And I'm not saying that it's just the variant grades of what we see. Maybe he is, and he does, and he does a very good job of hiding it, because I'll tell you what, with my mother, to some people, she had them fooled. So I'll bet that's a little bit of that is what's going on here. I do believe, and Joe says this throughout the video, I do believe, based upon what I've seen, and it's my opinion, Art's motive here is to maintain what he has for a following. Remember, he voluntarily stepped away. He's not out of ministry like Mike Bickle did, where he just got out of it and we never heard a peep from him. No, rather what we see with Art, as like we've seen with Drenda, as like we've seen with Joni, these people that refuse to step down. Drenda has not stepped down, her and Gary. They have not stepped down from ministry at Faith Life Church. And not only that, Drenda is holding a public political office in Knox County, Ohio, and she refuses to step down. Okay, Joni refuses to step down from Daystar. She knows, and she heard from her husband who passed away what his dying wish was for Jonathan to take over as president. These people refuse to step down. Here, what we see with Art, he admitted that he is stepping down temporarily. That means, in my mind, that there is an intent to come back. And we know from Laura-Lynn, because she's the one that is in contact with these victims, that, and speaking to their board, that it appears that they are all trying to restore him. That's the motive of operation here. The intent, the desire, their motive, it's to restore. But you really have to have true repentance before you can have that. You can't have this fake repentance. And that's what I believe we have here. And so let's move on with that. Going to Art's video, I said a lot without even getting to his video. So he starts out with, hey, friends and people out there, with all the swirl and everything going on, I've submitted to my team and board, and he's in his garage and he's filming himself, and this whole thing about the swirl and everything going on. Here's my first thought. If you were a true man of God, I would consider your opening. I would consider the circumstances of your opening, where you are, what you look like. I look for details because as an attorney, I'm looking for details. I'm looking for corroboration. I'm looking for truth. His eyes didn't look red to me. I would think that if he was truly a spiritual father or considered himself a father of Joe, that if he was getting ready to apologize, that he would start it off with something that's heartfelt and apologetic, but he didn't. Could there be some evidence of red eyes because he's been crying and just lamenting over this? There wasn't any of that. And I'm not saying that that's required. I'm just saying, you know, what goes along with somebody's apology or statement, there are other things that you can see that kind of corroborate that. And I just didn't see one thing that would corroborate that this is a heartfelt apology. And then the words he uses, and then how he sums it up at the end does it for me. And we'll get there. But we've got a bit of a ways to go. So, dry eyes, he doesn't tear up at all through any of this. Some sentences are kind of like fading. People do that when they don't want to say it, you know, and they're just like, oh, you know what I'm saying, and you know, kind of blah, 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 and they don't say it. He did that a couple of times. So this man's baseline is entirely different from what I would expect of a grieving pastor who is coming to the realization through social media that he hurt his son. It doesn't compute. No correlation here. It's one that contradicts the other. The statements that you say do not correlate with what we're seeing here. This baseline is off. And let me say this. The baseline's off for an apology, but it's not off for him. And I say that because he simply just does not have the ability to display empathy or care. So this would be normal to him. And you know what? I believe that the people that he's really trying to reach, they normalize this as well and say, this is just art. Because we see that all the time. with victims. We saw it with Mike Bickle, where people, they knew something was off, but they're like, oh, that's just Mike. He did kind of flirt. I mean, I've even experienced it where he would grab my cheek. And, oh, that's just Mike Bickle. But we are in the season of calling out even the smallest of smallest flags. Even if it's an orange flag and not yet red, we really need to be calling them out, because we are in a season of not only healing, we're trying to stop this stuff from happening and protecting people from falling into it. So Art said, he's referring to the video, and he said, well, I was in the process of trying to get with Joe, and then it got hijacked. And then Laura-Lynn said this may be where he was referring to her involvement. Okay. You know, I just wouldn't have picked that, but that's just me. I'm not going to nitpick everything, so I'm just not going to do that. So Joe talked about being weirdly loyal. That's a red flag, because we see that often where people are victimized. They have this sense of loyalty to this person that's victimizing them. So that's a red flag. If you can objectively state that you're weirdly loyal, or even loyal to a person, that's a red flag. And you might want to assess, hey, I might want to get out of this relationship because I'm just way too loyal. I'm not talking about like your spouse. Of course, you're going to be loyal to them, but somebody that's not your spouse. So he talks about how they were texting and they were going to get together. And then Joe says that 2 months later, he saw what was going on with Salem, and then it ignited it for him. So then Art says he's giving the apology publicly, because he refers to him as a former kind of spiritual son of mine went public, and a couple few things on YouTube, said a few things on a YouTube program. And that was a couple weeks ago. And then he refers to a little clip that was taken and said, does Art Lucier owe this young man an apology? And then Joe chimes in and says, repeatedly throughout this, he refers to me, Joe, as a spiritual son or a son, almost to reestablish a spiritual authority over me or a plea to my heart. Yes, I would agree. That is what he's doing. Joe is very insightful. And I would suspect that Joe has mulled over time and time again in his mind things that Art has said and continues to say. I know that's true for me. And it's endless and it's relentless, and it would keep me up at night. And it's just something that needs to be broken, because it's not important what Art says or what Art thinks of you, Joe, if you are listening. It's just not. This is not a person who cares about you or really about anybody. It's about himself. And I know for me, I've spent too much time going over things that I probably shouldn't have, and it wasn't productive. Now, that being said, you might have to address some things that you're going over because you're processing them with the Holy Spirit, or just doing what you need to do. So absolutely, you have to figure that out. But I know for me, it wasn't healthy at a certain point. So then Art says, I owe Joe Pulaski an apology. Okay, he does say that several times, and he does say, I apologize. But what's lacking is the acceptance of the rendition of the facts by Joe. Okay, I'm going to explain what I mean by that. He says, I'm doing this publicly because what Joe said was public. And he also says, and people are saying, what the heck is going on? He says it again in another way, but that's really important to focus on, because I think it's the latter. He's doing this publicly because people have come to him and said, what the heck is going on? Look, there's this Facebook group, and it has all of these people saying these things about you. And Joe went on Laura-Lynn's show and he shared this, this, and that. I'm sure that that's what's going on, because if you think that, more likely than not, there's healthy people with healthy minds that are looking at this sideways and thinking, what's going on here? And they're questioning him. That might be the motivation here. So Joe even says that he believes that Art is making a plea to everyone who still follows him. He says, Art is making the video for them and not for me. I 100% agree. So Art starts talking about his story. His story. That's what we see a lot. He has to give his account and explain, instead of just saying, I'm just going to give an example. If you were heartfelt and you were really apologetic and you really were concerned about Joe, I would have started it out like, oh my gosh, I have been crying for days. And yes, I'm going to do this publicly, but I tried to reach out to you and I didn't get you because he should have reached out to him first before he made this video. And I've talked to people. I am just so in just disarray. I am just crying and upset with myself, and I don't know what I can do to make it better, but I'm going to do everything I can to make it better. I promise. That's how you don't have to use my words, but you know what I'm saying. It would have started out like that. Not with, I've been in ministry since I was 20 and, 20 years or whatever. And we're just crazy and we're reckless and talking about the denominations in the church and this person left and we had 3 people. Just stop it. Stop it. It's all about you. And you know what? We know it's all about you because you're telling us. We can tell what's going on here by what you say. That's mostly what I do in my videos. I use what Lance Wallnau said, Perry Stone said, Patricia King said, Drenda Cassie, Joni. It's so easy. Just use what they say. They tell us all about themselves just by using what they say, and they can't stop talking about themselves. They just can't stop. You know what's interesting is the one who's really a monster, Mike Bickle. He was so smart he just shut up. He never said anything. He made one or two statements, admitted to a couple things, but then he just shut up. I think he's smarter than all you. He really is. He's a monster, but he's smarter in that sense. He had the sense to shut up. But not the rest of them because they can't help themselves. So he says to Joe, I love you, man. Joe, I did not even know you were still hurt and offended with me. So he knew. He knew. I apologize. One of the things that you shared, which people knew me, why did you do that? Again, people are saying that to him, to Art. They're saying, why did you do that? Because they're hearing about what Joe said. And then, so Joe cuts in and he says that he believes, again, that Art's video was created to address the people that follow him. 100%. It's an example of that. So Art said that people who knew me were like, why did you do that? It sounds like people are calling him out. I hope that's the case. But you know what Art is believing with his video is that they'll be satisfied with what he said. I did apologize. You heard me apologize to him. And there will be some that know him and they'll be like, oh yeah, you did. And they're probably just used to him or under his spell or loyal, however you want to term it. That's what we might very well see. We won't see it, but that is what's likely happening. Because Art made that video, people will be satisfied. Oh yeah, he did a public apology. Oh yeah, he's a good guy, referring to Art. But in reality, I would suggest objectively, based upon what we're seeing, it is not truly a public apology and it is not sufficient. And Joe should accept it for what it is. And I believe that he's at the place where he can accept it, that it is not an apology. So I saw this all the time, with my mom, with dealing with people. I deal with people still today with narcissistic qualities. And they just have to give their version. They have to come up with their defense. And they cannot and they will not allow you to just hear the true version and let it alone. And that would have been for Joe's testimony that he gave in Laura-Lynn's video. That would have been to let that alone and to accept every aspect of it. Because you heard Joe come back and say, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie. So what Art did was made it worse. Where there could have been some type of reconciliation, he made sure that there was none. Good job, Art. So he starts out talking about, this is what you don't do in reference to pastors and being in ministry. Again, all eyes on him, focus on him. He's the good guy and giving us the impression that, boy, he's learned a lot. He's learned a lot not to wrestle with people, not to jump off bridges. I mean, it's so silly. It's so silly. Let's talk about the heavy stuff. No, he's talking about jumping off bridges and wrestling with girls. That's what he wants to talk about. And you know what's really interesting is here is where he says he's leading all these young people and a whole group of them and described them as the ones who hung out at the smoking doors at school. Let that sink in. That's how he sees them. Any pastor that is pastoring a child or an adult, and they're still referring to you as perhaps where you were at one point in time, which was not how God sees you, I promise you that, run. That in and of itself, that's what he called these people, the ones who hung out at the smoking doors at school. That's how he sees you all of you victims. That is it, right there. Why would you say that? Because you have an unhealthy mind and you have narcissistic qualities and you want to make sure that everyone lifts you up and sees you in a good light while he's pushing down and causing people to see the ones that he allegedly helped in a bad light. It's a stereotype. It's a classification. It's demoralizing. It's demeaning. It's dehumanizing. He saved these ones, the altruistic Art. He saved them from the smoking doors. Why would you label them? This reminds me of, and you all probably, this could be a trigger for you because it triggered me. It reminded me of something that I forgot. So as you all know, I never lived in Kansas City. I never lived there to attend IHOP KC, but I would go there a lot. I had very good friends that they had a house and their kids, and we would stay with them. And they're wonderful, wonderful friends. And we would stay with them for a week, another week in the year, and I would go to the prayer room. My husband would play with their kids, and they're just wonderful, wonderful people. Now, there are other people that I knew that I met through them that I thought were friends, but were not. You know, you learn that. And I would share some information. There's two different people that I don't think they even knew each other. And so at times when, you know, I was going through a hard time or whatever, and I shared the information with both, and, you know, then years later, you know, I would have a post on Facebook, and one of them actually did this, responded to the post and said, oh, remember when you were going through this hard time on something? I'm celebrating something on my post, and this person that I shared that information with posts it. Never talked to him again. I have zero tolerance for that. Then the other person, she didn't do that. But then when I was just talking to her in a text or something, and then I mean, this is years later. Oh, remember when all that, you were just like, going through that, and and I'm telling you, they weren't saying it like, look how much you've gone through. It wasn't that. That. Another one, never talk to her again. You just have to cut these people out. I don't think those two people are narcissistic, by the way. Maybe they are. I don't know, because I haven't talked to them in years. And it's just bizarre. But you just have to get rid of that cancer. So, let's talk about the football. All right. So Art starts retelling the story, his version. Remember, Joe gave his version and said that Art forcefully impacted him and caused a lot of pain to his leg. So what does Art do? He feels like he has to give his rendition and his version, and it's entirely incorrect. Again, as I said before, if you were apologizing, you would have accepted as true what Joe said. There's no reason to do this other than to elevate yourself so that the people that you are still friends with or that you feel are still following you will look at you in a different light. That's the only reason for this, in my opinion. So Joe says that Art clearly saw him, even though it was dark. There's still lights around. And Art says the opposite. It's so dark he can't see anybody. And that he was trying to get the light stick or glow stick that they were using as a football. This is where it gets very confusing for a victim, because Joe says he keeps referring to me as his son. This is where it gets very confusing and is a red flag, because that's what they do. And I think that they do it intentionally, because Art's trying to draw Joe in with this alleged apology. And so he's going to refer to him as his son. But people speak out of both sides of their mouth here, right? You can say something positive that you refer to him as your son, but on the other side, those are the kids that hung out at the smoking doors. They do not correlate. One is going to negate the other. Have you ever heard of this, where if you're trying to, and I have to do this because I train attorneys in our firm. So if I'm critiquing them, I start out by giving them positives, and I'll do more positives. I'll give them more positives, and then I'll give them the critique, which, it just depends upon the frame or nature of the person, how they're going to take it. So I have to be careful of that. And I am, so that it doesn't disrupt their spirit. And I want to encourage. This is in the secular world, but we're not seeing anything that even remotely looks like that in a pastoral realm, which is so troubling, horrible. And I would submit that people I know that run firms or businesses, they do it the way I just said. If you are talking to somebody, you need to either discipline or correct. You're going to encourage them and tell them about good attributes, good qualities, good work product before you get to something that you need to address. That, I believe, is the normal, healthy way. But we don't see that with these. My eyes are going blurry when I go back and forth. So, all right. And these are dirty. So we don't see that with these pastors. And that's a red flag. And then he talks about the girl that was allegedly there that puked, and Joe says, no, that didn't happen. I'm going to believe Joe. It's up to you what you're going to believe. Everybody has their own impression, because you guys, as I said recently, I can't remember which video, but you guys are all, anybody watching any videos, you are the public square, you're the public jury or the mock jury, whatever you want to call it. This is for you to decide who's telling the truth. And it's your conclusion that you reach that's important to you. So I have to, I just question, why is Art making this video? Does he think that there's a possibility that Joe could still be loyal? Again, I still think that this is geared towards people, other people, not Joe and not to the victims. He's trying to control the narrative. So then Joe says he limped off the field and his leg did not look broken. But then Art says that this was a miraculous healing that night. And Joe says that's not what happened. He dealt with this leg that was injured for some time. So it's just sad. So Art says, "Sorry, Joe, I did not know you were still carrying that. Yeah, I'm sorry. Your other story killed my heart. You said it was the final straw for you, I think, for you leaving. You had said you were backslidden, you weren't coming anymore, and I took your furniture." "I did take your furniture," he said. Well, then Joe says that this never happened. That's interesting. Try to think about this part for a while. Why would he say that? And Joe even said, "I had a hard time wrapping my head around this because, according to Joe, Art did not take his furniture." So this part is strange. And so what I got from it was that Art is sharing that he's altruistic, right? He's generous. He's a good guy. He would outfit people with furnishings, that's what they would do. And he said that there was about 6 of them. Why would you even have to say that? Elevating himself, lifting himself up, the narcissistic quality. But how is this relevant to an apology? I would submit it's not. Joe pointed out that Art did not, in his apology social media video, did not even address most of what Joe talked about. Right. So Art just picked and chose what he was going to talk about. And interestingly, he picks this about furniture that's really not relevant. It's not a big ticket item, right? Just like I said, it's not one that was really hurtful, it seemed. And it didn't even happen, according to Joe. Instead of talking about wrecking a relationship he had, the pants, pulling down his pants, the cat in the garage, just the things that we know, he doesn't even address any of this stuff. If I were a victim, and this is just me personally, and this didn't have anything to do with Joe, but everybody knows it now, that text is out there of the woman with the special needs son. My gosh, I would address that. But he can't, and he won't. That is horrendous to me. That has no words. But at some point, you just have to realize these are serious and concerning behaviors. So it's actually helpful to Joe and to other victims and to the community at large that Art decided to make this video, because we can see what he's really doing. And we can see that it is not an apology. And perhaps we can go as far to say that maybe this person will never change. We can see how not sorry he is. So on the furniture issue, I concluded, I think that he confused him with somebody else, that he did wrong. That's how I concluded it with that. I think that Art does know of a situation that he did wrong somebody in regard to furniture, and he just mistook him for Joe. And Joe even said he didn't believe that Art even watched the whole video. Probably not, if he made that mistake. So this whole thing with this video, picking and choosing what he's going to address. And, I've seen this when you call out, sometimes, like, if for me in my job, I'll make bullet points of certain things, and then in an argument, and then they just kind of glaze over that. And I'm not talking about being narcissistic, but just in my role, and it's just trying to minimize, they'll glaze over this or that, and they'll focus on something else that really just doesn't have that much relevance, but you just see it in an adversarial nature. That is my point. So Joe said art frames it here as if art is the victim. You'll see that a lot with a narcissistic type personality, somebody that's evidencing and demonstrating those qualities. And yeah, I got that impression as well. He didn't have to say it. He's talking about, he, meaning art, he says, I heard it online, so I'm answering online. That's interesting because I remember Laura-Lynn saying that Art and Heather said that they're not online. Well, he just contradicted himself. He is online. He knows, he heard it online. I heard him say that. I heard it online. So even if people are telling him, no, Art, has heard it online. So he's online. So Art says, I'm not going to chase everything, referring to the victims and the things that have been said by the victims as to what Art has done. And then Joe goes into this. Why wouldn't you do that? And Joe says what he would do. I appreciate that, Joe, because you're a normal, healthy human being and you have a conscience and you have a moral compass. This is something that Art apparently does not have. So Art can't possibly do the things that you would do, Joe, because you're a normal, caring person. Again, back to that baseline. We're expecting a certain behavior out of somebody that has no ability to demonstrate. So if Art is not in a healthy state of mind, and likely hasn't been for some time, and may never be because we've seen this demonstrated over decades, it's impossible to think that he could actually give an apology that's really heartfelt. Going back to one of my videos, I talk about trying to rationalize with the irrational. That's my life, as an attorney. So I have to clearly identify what I'm going to be able to do with this certain person or this certain person. You just figure it out. It's very easy for me. I get it. I'm not trying to be boastful. It's just, that's my life. I do this for a living. So it's easy for me to see that. But I see that, unfortunately, with people that are, they're dealing with stuff, rightfully so, because they've been abused and they've been victimized. And they're like, but why did they do this to me? I'm trying to do, and yeah, you have to figure that out. That's one part of your healing. But trying to expect that that person is going to change, it might never happen. I so appreciate John T. He talks about how he was a narcissist and that he changed through God's help. Well, obviously, where there's a will, there's a way. God's going to do that. But he had to make that decision. John had to make that decision. And if these people are not interested whatsoever in coming to Christ, in fearing God, it's just going to continue business as usual with this type of mentality and with this type of behavior and the repetition of victimization. It is going to be repetitive, circular, if you will. It's just going to continue because it's not being dealt with. So clearly Art wants to share his side of the story, and we all have had experience with this. It's, ad nauseum, their side of the story. It's not helping your apology. And Joe even concludes that Art is not going to change. He hasn't changed, not a single thing, Joe says. You're right. That's 100% accurate. And I would venture to say it's never going to happen with him. If he's at this stage of his life, I don't know how old he is, but I would say he's probably in his 50s, maybe. I don't know. I'm really bad with ages. But if he is, more likely than not, he's not going to change. And you really can't have a relationship. As I had to cut that cord with my mother at a point, because with these type of people, they'll try to get in, and you're trying to heal. So think of it like a scab. You've got this scab that is healing, and then the person comes in and they do something else. Well, they're pulling apart that scab a little bit. You're never going to get healing. It's just going to keep pulling that scab, and it's never going to have healing. So you have to cut that cord. You have to sever it. You have to terminate that relationship. And sometimes it's a family member. And, I just didn't get good advice. I had advice from people that are like, no, you can't do that. You have to continue. That was the wrong advice. And so I can say, because now I'm looking back, over a decade, I am much happier now. I'm in a much better place. It was very chaotic. When you have somebody that, I would call my mother the Tasmanian devil. It was like wherever she went, you stirred up trouble, you stirred up destruction, destroyed people's lives, said nasty, nasty things. And if you have that in your life, you really have to determine whether or not you're going to make a statement and make a stand and sever that. Laura-Lynn started talking about where, and Joe said this on her video, that Art told Joe that when he left, he was going to die. And Joe was like obsessed with that. That is significantly immoral. It is. People don't even do that in the secular world. And this is a pastor? I'm going to keep saying that. This is a pastor? If anybody is watching this that is still following him, I hope that this resonates with you to take a look and question, this is a pastor who tells people that? And after his own daughter's death, says that God lifted his hand and allowed her to die because she would not submit to his covering? These are all red flags. There's hundreds of them here. I don't know how many I've talked about, maybe 20 on a conservative basis, but you can figure this out. This is not a pastor. Nobody should be ever restoring him and bringing him back as a pastor. Never. He should have never been a pastor. He even says, I didn't have the gifting, the pastor, the truth, the works, and helps. I had none of those. He admits it. So listen to him. He admits it. He was the Pied Piper to many broken people. He loves that about himself. That's his claim to fame, I think. Should not be a pastor. And again, Joe says, he refers to me as a broken person. That's where Joe says, I may have been messed up as a kid, and it's degrading to frame me as some broken kid. I agree, because you're not. You're not a kid. You are an adult. You have children. Joe said that in this video. All what Joe said is true. To constantly go back in time and identify you as that person, just like my two alleged friends did, it's demoralizing. It's insensitive. The only reason to do it is to make you feel bad. And that's what Art's doing here. And everyone can see it. It's so clear. Let me skip through. All right. So I just made these notes about my own thoughts, and basically I've summed them all up. When these church leaders, these pastors, mega ministries, they're crying out for revival. Can you imagine if God showed up and did that and brought these people that were unchurched, unsaved into these churches? What a tremendous mess, at the very least, we would have. God's not going to do that. There isn't going to be a revival in that sense. I think the revival, what we're seeing, it's culminating to that point, but we first have to get rid of the cancers that are in the church, that are in the pulpits, that are abusing people. That has to happen before the church. We have to have a healthy church, healthy leadership, healthy body of Christ, so that when people are coming in, they can be discipled appropriately and properly. Then Art talks about the instance where he physically flicked Joe's nipple that was in a state of healing. He had infection to it. It was painful. And Joe says absolutely what Art said is a lie, that Art intentionally inflicted the pain. I believe you, Joe, 100%. I believe people that are watching this 100% believe you. You know what corroborates? Again, I'm all about the details, because throughout the video, Art is showing his fingers. They were very big, very large fingers. And Joe had said that before. It's just a detail of corroboration. The entire video is just hurtful in nature, because Art wants to give his rendition of what happened, but we know that's not what happened. Joe's rendition is what happened. These people are so warped and demented that perhaps they just can't see that what they're saying is harmful. I believe, again, as I said in the beginning, the entirety of the video served to harm and re-victimize the victims. It did not serve in any way, in my opinion, as something that is healing. And any of those words, and he said it several times, I'm sorry, Joe, I apologize, Joe, I'm sorry, Joe, I didn't know. That is all negated because of your motive that you had in creating this video and putting it on social media. I want to end with this because this said it all. And he said it at the end. Art said, quote, I'm truly sorry for all the times that you felt I was a bully. End quote. You see this all the time when you're arguing with somebody and they want to give the appearance as if they're listening to you and considering what you have to say and concerned with the fact that you've been hurt. And then they go and throw this in, I'm sorry you felt that way. Well, you just negated everything you just said. And you can't really have that conversation. It's trying to rationalize with the irrational. So he was very successful in showing us his true heart. So I am very thankful that Art revealed his true heart by his own words, because they all do. They all do. You can just tell by what they say. But saying that you felt I was a bully. Well, if you had watched Joe's video, the first one with Laura-Lynn, you would have seen that Joe was essentially calling you a bully. Maybe he didn't say the words, maybe he did. And you're saying, instead of admitting that you were, because you have to know the rest of the world is seeing this through the eyes and lens of Joe, and we're accepting his rendition, not yours. You could have framed that differently, but you didn't. And you didn't for a reason, because you did not accept Joe's rendition, and this was not an apology. I'm glad he did it this way. Anyone with a functioning, healthy brain, and I'm going to say it in the context of an adult, because children, even young adults, their brains aren't fully developed. So anyone with a functioning, healthy brain would know that you never say something like this to somebody that you care about, who has displayed on social media just the hurt that you've caused him. You never say that. So that's what I have to say about this. My heart goes out to Joe. I pray that he is receiving the healing that I believe he is, because it does appear that he's good friends now with Laura-Lynn. I'm glad for that. I'm glad that Joe even said that he talks daily to other victims. There is so much healing in that as well. And so for that, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that Art made that video, because I think that the whole world is going to see it for what it is, and it's going to establish even further evidence that he should never be in ministry. What we have seen from videos from Joe, from that text message, I mean, that's a monster. That is not somebody that I would want as a friend, let alone as a pastor. So these are my thoughts. These are all my commentary, my opinions based upon what I've seen. And I hope that this helps somebody. And I hope that, I really hope that people like Art, that they eventually figure it out. I don't know if somebody that's this far gone can. In my experience, I didn't see it with my mother, unfortunately. Gave her every bit of rope, and it just didn't happen. But you know what? You always have to hold out hope. You just have to do it. And so perhaps, you know, he might figure it out and he might truly repent. It's not going to look like this. It's going to look like a true repentance if he ever does decide to do that. So thank you for joining me on this video. I hope you're all enjoying your weekend, and I will see you in the next video.